All right, thank you everyone, and welcome all investors to the panel discussion under the topic of climate action in Thailand, the business opportunities and challenges under the new policies. As there is growing concern about the global warming, we see lots of policies, initiatives, and binding agreements between countries on climate changes. For example, the Paris Agreement, which involves nearly 200 nations, aims to keep the rise of the global temperature below 1.5 degrees. COP28, that involves nearly all individual countries' deregulation, also targets net zero by 2050, also aims to reduce the fossil fuel and moving to the renewable energy. So may I first ask Khun Pavich to share his view on the Thailand's policy and the direction toward climate changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon at the audience. We are not, no doubt that the climate change is affected our countries. You can see flooding in the north, and as well as the very tragedy in the south of the Phuket. As you mentioned that we adopt the solution from the COPs as well as the international arenas. That's why we are set up, as you may know, that 2050 we will be the carbon neutrality, and 2065 will be the net zeros. However, we try our best, and we put and we integrate international solution into our plan, country plan. So we launched like the national contribution, the first NDC that we try to reduce the greenhouse gas emission 30% by domestic activities, and 40% if we are able to get some support from the international. And we leave some room, like 6% from the Article 6 from the Paris Agreement. That means that it is exchange the carbon credit between bilateral. So this is our Thailand pathway. And you can see that there's a lot of the activities that we been apply. For example, like the technology. You may see on the screen, the slide, that we move to renewable energy. We try to introduce carbon capture utilization or carbon capture storage. And we try to use like the hydrogen technology. And of course, the phase out the coal power plant. This is our target that we go along with. And you just mentioned that the COP28, there's a lot of the resolution, such as like triple of the renewable energy and doubling the energy efficiency. This is very challenges for Thailand because now you may see that we rely on the oil and gas for the electricity. And we try to introduce like the new technology that can be used instead of the oil and gas that I just mentioned. And also for the next phase of the NDC, there has been discussed that they will leverage like 40% to 60%. This is the second phase of the national determined contribution. So the Department of Climate Change and Environment, we launched to study the second phase of the second NDC. So we have to submit to the UNCCC next year on the plan, right? But we try to seeking with our country that, for example, like Germany, they said that, oh, it's very challenges for them as well. And US also, they are in the process of the election. So they are not committed to submit the second NDC by early next year. This is our challenges for the international arena. You may see that the climate change not only been impact to the economic, but also they impact social and environment. But for Thailand, Department of Climate Change, we try to establish the environment to or the tool for driving our target or the implementation of our target. So the first important mechanism is the law and regulation. So we draft the Climate Change Acts. You may know that we already hearing some public hearing, and now we are in the process of the considering and scrubbing the content in the climate change draft. So the climate change draft, roughly we can divide or into the 4 components. Firstly is the institution section. Secondly is the mitigation section and adaptation, as well as the enabling environment. You can see that the mitigation section is very important. We put some like greenhouse gas database or the ETS or carbon tax or carbon credit in this part. It's very important to the business as a whole. And of course, the climate change fund will be accommodate, like when we use the scheme of the ETS or even the carbon tax, we put some money into the climate change fund for contribute to like the government or any local administration, as well as the some SME or some people to get impact from the climate change. And also, I think that the draft of climate change is very important, and we've been closely discussed with the relevant agencies, such as the Department of Finance, for example, like the Excise Department, Custom Department, and Revenue Department, to decide what is the tangible or the scheme that we put or impose any taxes or on the products or on the process of the industrial sectors. And on the top of that, I think that the ETS is very important as well, because we've been imposed by the international trade, such as the CBAM, for example, like next 2 years, you will be take some enforcement from the CBAM, EU CBAM. So it's allowed that the country to export to the EU, you have to have like the climate change act that will charge or any carbon tax or any the ETS or carbon allowance, and you pay in domestic, and you can export to the EU. This is very important, that why we have the Climate Change Act. Excise tax itself or revenue tax itself is not able to export to the EU. This is very important for the industrial, and as well as if we have like the Climate Change Act, we will establish like the business environment to focusing on the very low carbon business. That's why we are able to attract some foreign investor to be invest in Thailand on the green technology or green industry. This is the clue of the Climate Change Draft Act. So this is the concise, the detail of the Climate Change Act. Perhaps you can able to download and study in advance because we're thinking that we will accelerate the process to submit the draft Climate Change Act to the Cabinet by October, and perhaps after that, we go to the Parliament, and we expect that the Climate Change Act will are able to enact by around next year or the year after. This is our the policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kap. So let me ask one more thing. You mentioned that the implementation of this Climate Change Act would be somewhat around next year or maybe a year after next, right? So this would be in line with the implication in the implementation of the CBAM. So this will go along, right? So can you comment on this, please?
Yeah, this is why that's, I mentioned that why we put some chapter regarding the carbon tax and ETS in the Climate Change Act. Because I just mentioned that the EU allow the country who has the legislation relevant to the climate change to impose the tax in domestically and export to the EU.
Thank you, Kap. So now we all know that the acts could be come out around next year, and the first draft could be in the fourth quarter this year. So moving to the next questions, I would like to ask Khun Chaiwat about how do business adopt to meet the new climate regulation in terms of Bangchak Corporation?
Right. Good afternoon, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, there you go. That's my slide. Right. I guess when they ask that how business should react with these things, I guess I would probably compare that with if anyone walk into the stock exchange and say that what should I do with my cash? So it's very simple questions, but actually a lot of things behind it. When you said what to do with your cash, probably being an advisor, you might want to know how old is the guy or the girls, what's her age or his age, and what kind of revenue she or he generate, and how long will he still generate that kind of income, whether that kind of income is still stable or not, right? And then how much cash you have to invest. So those are the things that you need to understand before you actually can give an advice. Probably the same will go to these very questions when you ask, how business going to react to the upcoming, what is it called, Carbon Act or Climate Change Act, whatever that is. I guess first thing first is that one probably need to know where you are, where you're up to. The two terminology there is actually, I think, it's really relevant for each and every one of us, where you really want to know how much carbon you emit each day, or probably each year rather, through your process. That's basically what they call CFO. It's no longer chief financial officers, but it's basically carbon footprint organizations. So you really need to know what sort of carbon you emit, or even greenhouse gas you emit over the period of the years. So and where does those carbon come from, or greenhouse gas come from? There is a standard there, ISO 14064, that you can comply with. And then also for those who have the product to be sold to, especially the developed market like EU, you need to learn another terminology there, which is CFP. Basically, it's the product life cycles, how much carbon that product, associate with. So, an EV car actually might have a bigger CFP than the ICE car. If you track back since they mine lithium, cobalt, and all that, all the way until they make cars and deliver to your doorstep. And until you destroy that car. That's the CFP, and that's the whole life cycles of that particular product. So these are the two things probably you really need to know first so that you can prepare yourself. At Bangchak, we start to disclose our carbon footprint back in 2011, before they even have the regulations. Although I believe the real regulation only came out for the CFO in 2019 and CFP 2023. But we've been consistently, try to make ourselves comply with this kind of thing. So we know where we are, and that's how we could probably prepare ourselves for it. But knowing is one thing. The next thing is, what is your roadmap? How you gonna make that happen? This is also, I think that's what we thought about it back in 2020 during the pandemic time. And I believe that it's more or less 3 years. Take that every other organization is also more or less using it as a reference. So basically, when we talk about carbon neutralities by 2030s or net zero by 2050s, nobody know where we're going to get there in 2050s, but pretty much everybody have a plan to do some things by 2030s. And most of those people who have planned to do things are basically, they have a plan to manage what they call scope 1 and scope 2. Another two terminologies to add on top of it. A lot of you probably know about this, but I just want to be, everybody on the same, playing field, same levels. Basically, scope 1 is the carbon you emit in your process, your production process. And scope 2 is basically those utility you use to produce product. Like you buy electricity, you get clean waters, or that kind of things. That will basically be counted as a scope 2 in that process, how much carbon that been emitted, that's scope 2. Whatever is not in the scope 1 and 2 is scope 3. I'll get to that later. But basically, I've been through a few countries, talked to a few people. It seems that most of people have that plan by end of this decade to reduce scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. And here are the 3 yardstick that I would probably recommend each and everyone to look into that and see, back into your own organizations, what else you can do. The simplest one, and probably the cheapest ones, is basically how you improve the efficiencies of your machineries, how you're going to improve energy intensities of your machineries, your buildings. Even being a property developer, just came back from Sydney, and I can see that, they start to think about how to use less light, how to use less aircon, how can you, solar roof is only normal, okay? Every high rise now have a solar roof. But what actually happened is that they plant underneath the solar. So first, by having all these plantations beneath the solars, you cooling the solar panels, make it more efficient. But on top of that, by having those plants on the roof, you reduce temperatures of the buildings by 20 Celsius. It's really that much that I can reduce, and then you consume less energies. So all these kind of things, a lot of simple, and we just ignore it. And a lot of things can be done through these energy efficiencies or efficiency improvements in your processes, including too much light here, where you need to turn on the aircon That's not efficiencies, right? That can be improved. That kind of things. Normally, the power price anywhere from 10 to 30% of your carbon footprint can basically be improved in that process improvements. The next one is a little bit more expensive, but I think we've seen that all the times. Even before this climate change era, is you do some plantations, right? So it's basically a natural sequestration of carbon dioxide or greenhouse gas. So that is a bit more expensive. The last bit is probably the most expensive one, and sometimes we don't even know whether those technologies have arrived yet. This I'm talking about the like of e-fuel, the like of hydrogens, or CCUS. This thing, we talk a lot about it, but basically it's just, a bit too expensive for the time being. And I think we're still awaiting the technologies to be able to, justify those kind of investments. So these are basically the three yardsticks, which we also use in Bangchak to try to reach, our net zero target. The last bit is probably the most expensive one and most difficult one. It can be $1 trillion, it can be $1 zillion. It's the scope 3, or the whole ecosystem, how you're going to reduce their emissions. I guess most of the companies, organizations, your own scope 1 and 2 emissions is anywhere from 10 to 20%. The remaining 80% are scope 3s, and totally you can't control it. In oil and gas, which is basically, the worst, devil in terms of emissions, our process, scope 1 and 2, only account about 7% of total emissions. But another 70% are basically scope 3s. And that you need to talk to your ecosystem. You need to work with your supply chain. You work with your stakeholders and try to find a way to reduce the carbon emissions. And that will basically, what I said just now, the CFP, the whole product life cycles. You need to look through the whole cycle and see how you're going to manage and reduce that. And that is still a question waits to be answered. I don't think anyone find, a way, a pathway to achieve that. So come back to your questions. Basically, it's a bit long, the answers, but basically, you need to understand yourself first, where you're up to, and basically how you're going to reduce your own scope 1, 2 emission. I guess those are probably the most important bit for the time being.
Thank you, Kap, actually. So it's your turn, Mr. Yash. So Indorama Ventures has over 100 plants or over 30 countries. So what opportunities and challenges do you see from the climate change policies?
Thank you. So Indorama Ventures it's a global chemical firm manufacturing mainly PET, plastic, and polyester fiber globally. So we have certain sustainability targets. We want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 30% by 2030. Similar to the Thailand plan, we want to have our feedstock moving away from fossil-based to bio-based. We want to have 25% of our total feedstock coming from either bio-based, renewable, or circular feedstock. So on the first slide, and moving away from fossil feedstock to bio feedstock really reduces your emissions by 50 to 70%. The BCG principle of Thailand, or the initiative of Thailand that was set out in 2021, soon after, in 2022, we came out with what we call our Vision 2030, to have 16% of our feedstock move from fossil-based to bio-based, and another 9% to circular feedstock. What that means is recycling, bottle-to-bottle recycling or textile-to-textile recycling. The way to get to do that is through advanced recycling, mechanical recycling, moving away from fossil feedstock to wood or sugar or corn-based feedstock to make PET plastic. And Thailand has a good opportunity to do that. We have the raw materials here. We have a lot of wood. We have a lot of sugar. And that can be used towards this Thai ambition of BCG to have the bio feedstock replace fossil feedstock. On the circular side, Thailand recently allowed for bottle-to-bottle recycling, which has dramatically helped the circular economy when it comes to PET bottles. At IVL, we have a target of recycling 50 billion PET bottles per year by next year globally. We are close to getting there, but that required some regulations coming into place. The last one that came into place was Thailand, and that will help the waste management create a circular economy for bottle to bottle, where originally before it was going to landfill or it was being incinerated. However, when you use bio feedstock, it is much more expensive than fossil-based feedstock, similar to what Chaiwat was saying. And we need to be incentivized, and we need to work with with the public sector as well to sort of enable this push towards these innovative technologies and innovative materials. Today, Thailand is not as competitive compared to its neighboring countries. When it comes to power price, the power cost is usually the majority of the variable cost when it comes to manufacturing industries. So in Thailand, our power price is, it's higher, it's on the higher end in the ASEAN. It's similar and higher than China and India, and it's much higher than Indonesia and Vietnam. And we compete with these countries when it comes to imports as well as exports. At the same time, in Thailand, we're not able to access renewable power directly. It has to be via the grid, because there's no wheeling of power allowed in Thailand. Even though in China and India, the power price is similar or a little bit less than Thailand, they do allow direct access to renewable energy. And what we've seen in those countries is renewable energy is half the price of the grid price today. It's roughly 4 to 5 cents. Compared to the grid price of about 10 cents. Similarly, in Vietnam and Indonesia, the power price is 7 or 8 cents, so it's much lower. And as I mentioned, power price being the majority of the variable cost in manufacturing, it's hard to compete with these countries. So what we need in Thailand also is to incentivize industry, incentivize manufacturers to be able to use renewable. What that does is it reduces your cost, your variable cost, but it also reduces your carbon emissions at the same time. So it helps us also follow the policies of Thailand, the Climate Action Pact of Thailand. So I mentioned the power price being the most expensive. Adding the carbon tax or ETS to our manufacturing process will further increase our cost in the manufacturing industry in Thailand. And this needs to be done carefully. In Europe, Europe is not a competitive manufacturing base compared to the US or compared to other importing countries. And what we've seen over the past 2 years in Europe is it's made a difference in some countries, but a lot of the manufacturing hubs of Europe have had to shut down many of their sites. Not necessarily because of the carbon tax, but because those countries also had a much higher power price because of the Russia-Ukraine war, which was the catalyst of that power price increasing. So in Thailand, we have to be careful that we don't make it even less competitive by adding an ETS or carbon tax. I like the slide that Kun Chaiwat showed about the different pricing, and there are phases of when we can actually implement technologies. In our industry, we either use natural gas is imported in Thailand, so we rely on natural gas, and it's again more expensive than most countries. And natural gas is the clean source of power that's accessible here in Thailand. So, moving away from natural gas to renewable energy as a power source further reduces your emissions as well as your cost. CBAM in Europe, it's coming soon. It's coming in certain sectors, in the high emitting sectors. So for our sector, it's going to come much later on. And we hope to see the technologies required to, for example, carbon capture. We don't have any carbon capture technologies at the moment in our company, but we are looking at implementing it. It's very expensive, so we are looking at it where the government provides a scheme and subsidizes the capex of putting in a carbon capture technology. So we need to, at the same time, I believe Thailand is in a good spot. We have good opportunities here where we can revive our competitiveness in manufacturing. Our footprint, as far as the IEA factor is concerned, the country IEA factor, is actually much better than China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, even Philippines. Our factor is about 0.5 compared to 0.7 to 0.8 in the other countries, because other countries are still using more coal than we are. So we are ahead as far as our sustainability emissions factor is, but we have to maintain that competitive advantage by making renewable even more accessible, and then incentivizing further technologies to reduce our emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So back to Khun Chaiwat, as Bangchak is one of the leading domestic refineries, so what renewable sources do you think will help you achieve sustainability?
Right. Hello? Yep. Right. I guess that's a very good question, is that what renewable energy can help. I guess we all know about the shortcoming of renewables energies, right? Where typically, as we know, if it's gas-fired power plants or thermal power plant, you can run 24/7, 365 days a year. Yeah, that's right. But when you come to other renewables like solar, it's basically 20% capacity factors, i.e., you can run only 20% per day in terms of power generation, and you need to find alternative source when it's dark, or if it's wind farm, then it's probably more like 30%, right? So those are the shortcomings of the renewables, and how could we make them more sustainable? We have seen here, if I may go back, you have seen Xinjiang there. That's basically the desert area, and you can see the coastal of China. You can see that this is a night shot of China, and most of the light are basically at the coastal part of the countries where they consume a lot of electricity. And Xinjiang is probably, 6,000-7,000 kilometers away. What happened is that in China, they turned all those deserts into solar farm. A huge amount of solar farms up there. You won't ever visit it. And then they basically have what they call ultra high voltage transmissions, transmit green electron from Xinjiang to the coastal provinces. So you can see 10 years ago, renewable account for only about 20% of power generations. This is not megawatt hour. This is not megawatt. This is megawatt hours. So it's actual electron that consumed in China. 10 years ago, it's only about 20%. And typically, when people talk about renewables, the bulk of the green electron come from hydropowers. Reason being, hydropower, the capacity factor is about 50 to 60%. So it's much more reliable compared to wind farms or solar farms. But in China, last year, 50% of its electricity generations actually come from renewables. And you drill down further, surprisingly, is solar actually get the biggest share, not hydro. So I guess they really find a way to bridge the gap about, what they call intermittencies where, the powers can come and goes when there is a crowd, when there's raining, you don't have electricity, but they manage to solve that problem. And I think that's quite important. And as we all know, it's not 1 billion. I think it's more like 10 billion US dollar subsidies each and every year for the renewable in China. So I think to make that happen, it's important to bridge the gap there, which I call it to bridge the space and time gap. Okay, space gap is just like what happened where you produce in Xinjiang. That's the source of your energies, and the load or the use is in coastal provinces, and it's 6,000 kilometers apart, and how you bridge that space gap. And also sometimes what they call time gap, where like, for example, in Thailand, most of the wind farm will only generate electron during midnight until 4 in the mornings, where there's no demand for it. That's the time gap. We have demand at about 7 p.m. Those windmills are not turning. How are you gonna bridge that gap? I guess those are the two big questions, big issues to make renewable workable. It's actually in the energy space, it's very common problems. Back into the fossil era, and we're still in the fossil era by the way. You can see that oil actually been pumped out from Middle East. Demand is probably in Europe or New York, or you can shale oil in the central of USA, but the demand is at the coastal, state of the US, or that kind of things. So what happens is that we pump them up and then we transport them to where the demand is, right? So how we gonna transport all this green electron across? I guess that's actually quite important. We have seen they're using ultra high voltage transmissions. Typical high voltage transmission is about 500 kV. In China, it's 1,000 kV. And they're not using alternative current, they're using direct current. So that means the loss in the transmission is less. That kind of things. The other very interesting case study is that this actually, bridging both the space and time problem is this is where Chile and Argentina is. Apart from they produce a lot of lithium, they also in the country where it's very little rain drop, a lot of sun, and at high altitude. So basically, you have a solar panel there, power is for free. Okay, power is for free. They're using that power that generate from both wind and solars to break the waters into hydrogens. And then they transport that in liquid form to Europe, what they call e-fuels. So if anyone who drive Porsche, you will know that Porsche already have a sort of a factories in Chile to make e-fuels, because electricity there is so cheap and you can just do the hydrogens. And the means of transport normally is always in the liquid form. Okay, basically, you look at it, if it's gas, you to carry it, it's very difficult. You to compress it, right? You can't just transport oxygen in this room to another room, right? You need to do something with it. So in the gas form, it's very difficult to transport. In the solid form, it's also very difficult. Example of solid form is battery. You can see battery is so heavy, right? All the EV car, about 50% of the weight is actually batteries. To transport from one place to another is rather difficult. But in liquid form, it can be anything. It can be oil, like benzene or diesels, or it can be biofuels. That's what we are in biofuels. It can be SAF, sustainable aviation fuels. Those are also in liquid form. You can transport much easier. You can using it, by truck, by train, by barge, by VLCCs, by Suez Max, whatever it is, you can transport it. And that's what we are in. So I guess to answer your questions, we need to bridge the time and space gap. And way to do that it's still, we need more innovations associated with that. And then if we can transport across the space and time, especially energy storage. And the best form to store those energy is in liquid form.
Thank you, Kap. So up to this point, I believe that we all know about the climate change policies. We all know that the corporates, the business have very well adapting themselves to these changes, both refineries and petrochemical. So now let's turn to the impact of these climate on the business. So may I ask Kun Pavich about the impact of these upcoming climate changes policies or acts on the business and investments, as well as the foreign investment in Thailand? Thank you.
I just mentioned earlier that there's some part that in the draft of acts that the corporate have to report the emission to the government. That's why they will have to preparing the report like CFO or any carbon report to the government. At the first place, I think that it will impose to the big company rather than the small, medium, or micro organization, because I think that the big company is well preparing for the upcoming climate change acts. That's why we try to facilitate the SME and leverage the capability to making a report. Because why, like Kun Chaiwat just mentioned, that the supply chain is very important to the business. Therefore, this act will be accommodate all any businesses, big, small, or medium, and micro because without the act, we are not able to take some data of the greenhouse gas emission. Without data emission, we are not able to making some policy or any measures to make some target to reduce the greenhouse gas in line of the 1.5 decarbonization temperatures. That's why I think that the corporates have to well prepare. And secondly is because of the carbon tax and ETS. The ETS itself is rational. Is the company have to try to cut down the greenhouse gas emission first, and rather than that, they will have to buy any carbon from the, for example, like from the company that can get some very least of the carbon emission, or even you can buy from the carbon stock from the natural resources. And also the one that will impact to the business is the carbon tax that I mentioned, that at the first place we will impose to the fuel first, and because we've been discussed with the excise department that decide how to collect some tax from the process or from the products. However, for the incentive, we've been discussed with the revenue department that the technology that or the company are able to introduce high technology that like CCS or CCUS that will costly the investment. That the incentive is how can government to subsidize or making some return from them, and as well as the how the BOI can support from the foreign investor to make the investment for the high technology in Thailand. This is the way that we are deciding in the Climate Change Act. And the last but not least is how can the company to making the transition to the low carbon industry or the low carbon manufacturing, because of the we have the limitation of the renewable energy currently, but for like Kun Chaiwat just mentioned that we have the opportunity to increase some renewable energy in Thailand. But for renewable energy, we are discussed with the Ministry of Energy. They put some PDP or any power plan that go along with the our target. So make sure that the energy plan is go in line with our transition. So this is the impact that will come up with the Climate Change Act when we take into enforcement.
Thank you, Kap. So it seems that business will have some additional costs to implement with these climate changes policy. So the next question would be the climate changes policies, how these affects the business landscape in terms of cost and benefit trade-off. Mr. Yash, can you comment on this, please?
Yes. Yeah, so I mentioned the climate action. It includes the carbon tax, but it also includes a push towards renewable energy, a push towards bio, which reduces your emissions. So it does push the industry to implement biomaterial, which reduces your emissions by over 50%. It pushes you to use renewable energy, which again, it's renewable energy, so it's much lower emission. And at the same time, if you don't fall under that allowance of emissions, then there's a ETS or a carbon tax that further incentivizes you to come below. One challenge that we face, these schemes, many governments have been talking about these schemes globally. I think it started in Europe, when they really look after their environment, they came out with different ideas. So we have been trying to implement the same kind of thing in Europe, and where we find some friction is on the consumer and customer side. For many years, when inflation was low, consumers did surveys there are many surveys about whether consumers are willing to pay a premium for more sustainable products. And over 80–90% of consumers back then used to say yes, they're willing to pay a premium. More recently, when inflation has been higher, especially in 2022, consumers are now wishing for more affordable products rather than sustainable products. So we have to be mindful about the price point on the shelves for consumers. Because when you implement biomaterial, when you implement carbon capture, when you implement expensive technologies and expensive materials to reduce your emissions, someone has to absorb that cost, and someone also has to pass on that cost at the same time. So so you need also the value chain to work together. You need the supply chain to work together to really understand how will the cost be passed on to the consumer, what is the impact on the consumer, and is the consumer willing to afford that impact? This is a bit of a turnaround we've seen in Europe. I give the example of PET. Recycled PET is 30% more expensive than virgin PET. It follows different economics because the raw material, instead of being oil-based raw material, it is recycled bottles as a feedstock, which actually is more expensive. So customers who had targets of recycled content are taking their time on meeting those targets because it makes it more expensive for them and at a time when consumer demand is a little bit low. Similarly, that can probably be considered in other products where you need to make them more sustainable. So, at the same time, we support the Climate Action Pact and we are aligned towards it. We have our blueprint ready, but cost is a big impact for businesses to actually implement and execute on these plans. And working with the public-private partnership to incentivize these plans also would help. And how the value chain and supply chain would absorb this cost so that the consumer doesn't have to take that impact also needs to be considered.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I twist to another angle. Can I ask Mr. Chaiwat about your opinion of how can business strategically prepare themselves for the impact of climate policies to maintain competitiveness both domestically and internationally? Thank you.
Right. I guess it's really a tough call, how you're going to balance things. On one hand, as he just said, that, by implementing all these climate change measures, climate change impact product, it means higher cost. And in the renewable space, it's not higher cost, it's reduced cost, but at the same time, the price also, press on it. You can see that green electron 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago, being sold at about 12 baht per unit. Now it's being sold at about 1.5 baht per unit. So you don't get returns, and how you're going to answer to your shareholders, right? So to transitions into sort of a new areas, you really need to be really carefully venture into that. In Bangchak, I guess we as I said, we've been prepared for a very long times. We've been following the trends. We were among the first to introduce biofuels, and you can see that biofuel is now being used as a law and regulations. So we enjoyed the first part of it. We also invested in lithium minings, and you might know that 2 years ago, lithium mining was sold at about $18,000 per ton. When we first invested in, it was only about $1,000 per ton. But now, actually, the price collapsed because of the EV demands and all that. So I guess timing is quite important, and to understand the industry is also quite important. Of late, we built what we call SAF plant, Sustainable Aviation Fuels, in our refineries at Phrakanong area. That again come as a mandatory by those who want to fly into, at least in Europe, by 2026. You need to mix that into the jet fuel. If any airline fly in didn't mix that into that jet fuel, then they will be subject to fine, and the fine is the double of the price if they were, if they were buying it. But since they didn't buy it, they didn't pay the fine, which is double the cost. And that SAF at the moment is about 3 times jet fuel price. And obviously, this will be passing on to the consumers. And it's up to consumer what do they want to do. At the moment, everything, we are complaining that air tickets are so expensive these days, right? Yet once SAF is introduced, it's going to be even more expensive. So it's going to become a rock and hard place now. We need to choose. So it's really very, very, very difficult, and probably something the management really need to, follow the trends and discuss a lot about things that are going to happen. I actually have a slide, but I don't want to show it here. But I can just tell you that if any one of us ever been visiting Elon Musk's plant in California, Vermont, if I'm not mistaken, in his company, there's a big, vision of the company said, we will accelerate energy transitions. So he is basically, as we all know, a really big force in these energy transitions. A couple of weeks ago, through his X, the old Twitter, he interviewed probably incoming presidents, I don't know. It's still very tight, right? It's at, the ranking between Harris and Trump is basically statistically error, right? So we don't know who's going to, assume office in November. But I think Musk is on Trump camp. And he actually interviewed Trump. And what came out from that discussion is that this comes from Musk himself. Energy transition will be moderate. You don't think, and he said that not everyone, need to drive EV car. And people should not trivialize those who in the fossil business. These are all come from Musk, who actually he said he want to accelerate energy transitions, right? So probably we really need to balance things a little bit. It's very difficult time at the moment. We don't do it, we will subject to CBAM. We do it, we need to explain to our shareholders and our customers. So that is a delicate balance there.
Thank you, Kap. And I have come across one of the research saying that the implementation of these climate changes could adversely affect up to 14 industries, and that could hurt up to 6.5 trillion Thai baht, or about 35% of national GDP. And that comes to my last question to Khun Pavich. So, as a regulator and authority, how do you balance the goal of climate changes and the negative impact to business in terms of the rising production costs? Thank you.
Like I said, the government have the responsibility to balance the country development as well as the impact from the climate change to not only for the private sectors but also for the people as well. Therefore, we think that how can we create or formulate any measure that be able to facilitate or accommodate any private sectors and as well as the people. Like I said, that for example, like in the Climate Change Act, we put some mitigation as well as the adaptation, and we will have the climate fund. This is the vehicle that can be support any even private sectors, people, public sector itself. So make sure that our measure or any policy that will not be a burden for the private sectors. And the private sector who get impact from the loss and or any damage from any disasters, we think that this fund in the future be able to facilitate or support any cost that has been from the natural disaster itself. But we have to decide what is the measures or regulation that are able to end the environment of the business. So we ensure that any policy or any measurement that the government has launched to the public will help any stakeholders, our stakeholders, not only for private sector or any people, but for the Thailand as a whole. But we have to working together. It means that the government itself or public sector itself have to discuss very closely with the private sectors to make sure that any policy or any measure is not be a burden to their business, as well as how can we balance not take side to the private sector, but we have to take care of all the people who vulnerable to the climate change impact as well. So.
Thank you very much. And actually, we have come to an end. So I would like to thank you, our honorable panelists coming today. So that concludes our discussion for today. I wish you a pleasant conference for the rest of this week. Thank you.